Live streaming is on.
And we're in business. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry that we're starting a couple minutes late. There was some sort of issue and we weren't able to stream, but we're good now. We are having a show tonight. Despite, as those of you who are not in New Jersey, in the Northeast like we are, may not be aware, there's a big snowstorm outside right now. But we're both at home. This isn't an issue for us, so you'll have a show. I will leave Brian to jangle keys while I post links, and then we're good to go. I mean, come on, man. This is your one job. You should have your keys handy every time.
I should. They're like in my pants.
There we go.
Hard to get out.
Copy. So tell us, there you go. It's not related to tonight's topic, but it's something to keep people busy. How is revising your new book going?
Pretty well. I've made my way through it once more, doing another pass, and I fixed some stuff, and now it's with kind of the beta readers for the final, see if there's anything that needs fixing still.
Awesome. And we are actually now ready to go. So your timing was perfect. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to tonight's very snowy episode of Paranormal Encyclopedia. As always, I'm your host, Kevin Mears, Demonologist, Paranormal Encyclopedia. And I'm joined by my co-host,
the Jersey Devil. No, Brian McKinley, author and vampire fan.
And godfather of vampire thrillers.
Yeah.
I want to say hello to Teresa Hall and Lisa for Truth, who've already poked their heads up to say, hey, we're here in chat. Always appreciate you guys being with us. So tonight our topic is going to be cryptids. What are they? Do they exist? What do they like on their pizza? I don't know. But why don't let's put yes. Lisa, Mothman would definitely qualify. I don't know a whole lot about him. So
yeah, he's not a normal cryptid. He's more like a Slender Man kind of thing, where he was made up essentially by one journalist, I think, and the story just kind of
was he?
Yeah,
because I read at least a little bit of. I mean, the original Mothman book. I read a little bit of it. And the thing that occurred to me reading it is, yeah, there were stories about Mothman in it, but it was more of like a collection of folklore, not a single continuous account of one creature.
Right. Yeah, that's what I mean. I don't think the Mothman really existed as a folklore or a story before that guy made it up. I may be wrong about that. That's something that I had heard in another thing about cryptids.
I don't know a lot about Mothman, so I honestly don't know for sure. I do know that a lot of cryptids fall into a very fuzzy category of, is it folklore? Is it fake lore? Is it a meaningful distinction even? Because, yeah, the Slender Man started as a online game, essentially. I think a contest specifically.
Yeah.
And then it's bubbled out into this whole quasi-folklore, quasi-fiction thing.
Yeah.
Jackalopes are largely thought to be folklore or fake lore. The difference being folklore is something people have legitimately at some point believed in. Like vampires would be a good example of actual folklore. We find, I just saw a post by our friend Dacre Soker earlier today about them finding corpses with sickles over their throats.
Oh, yeah.
As a protection against vampires.
Popular.
We have clear historical evidence that people took this seriously at one time. Fake lore would be something like Paul Bunyan, who was originally a marketing campaign gimmick, or Pecos Bill. And Lisa for Truth asks, do you know about the Rougarou? Brian, do you know anything about that one? I've heard of it before, but I don't know a whole lot.
Which one? The Lugaroo?
Rougarou. No, Roo. Guru.
Rougarou?
Yeah.
No. That does not sound familiar.
I'll be honest, I think the main reason I've heard of it is the TV show Supernatural.
Ah,
And it's early enough in Supernatural's run that it still was dealing more with actual urban legends and folklore than... the later Supernatural goes, the further off the original premise of everything that shows up in the show should be Googleable.
yeah.
It gets. So Lisa for Truth says it's like a Louisiana Bigfoot in the Louisiana swamps, according to Teresa Hall. That's interesting.
Skunk ape or whatever.
Maybe it's Louisiana's version of the skunk ape. If anyone doesn't know, skunk ape is basically Florida's version of Bigfoot. There are creatures like Bigfoot in a lot of different countries of folklore.
Yeah.
For example, the name Sasquatch most people associate with Bigfoot is actually Canadian, from a Canadian tribe's language, though I forget which one.
Yeah.
And there's Northern America, modern U.S. tribes called the Uma. But of course, there's also the Yeti in Nepal and the Himalayan mountains.
Yeah. The wild men in China.
Yep. And one I'll come back to in a second because I want to address a really good question Lisa for Truth asked, which is, what about La Lorna? From what I know, and again, I haven't studied this as much as I'd like to, but as far as I know, La Lorna is more of a ghost story.
Yeah.
Because it's supposed to be an actual, as I understand it, and I may be wrong, it's supposed to be an actual woman who died, and it's her ghost doing these things. That said, there's an enormous amount of overlap between the paranormal, as in ghosts and spirits and demons and fairies, and cryptids.
Yeah. I usually try to think of cryptids more as creatures that are believed to exist, but just not quite proven. Like I kind of separate them as different from, mythological folklore creature, things like chupacabra or whatever. Like that's a cryptid that has kind of taken on a mythological aspect, but people at one point believed that it actually existed as a creature.
Funny enough, I'm not sure they ever did.
No.
My ex-fiance before Misha was actually from Puerto Rico, which is one of the biggest areas for supposed chupacabra sightings. She was living on the island in like just before the big time when the whole thing became popular, and like me, she was a folklore buff. Never heard the story until she came to the United States.
Yeah, I know it's told a lot and talked about a lot in the Southwest.
Yeah, I have a theory about chupacabra. By the way, I think it's a known animal. Because it's a small flying creature that feeds on livestock, mostly seen in Mexico, Central America, and the southern United States. Can we think of any known animals that feed on blood and fly that live in that area?
Yeah.
Although you make an interesting point about the drawing that line between the mythical and the cryptozoological. Give me another example, but I want to make a counterpoint to that. So give me another example of one you think is more of a straight cryptid.
Like Nessie, like the Loch Ness Monster was believed to be some dinosaur that was left over, or any of the lake monsters. They're believed to actually exist and just be something that hasn't been identified. And
this fits exactly into the point I want to make. Thank you. It wasn't the one I would have thought you'd go with, but it works just as well. So here's the thing about Nessie. We have records of Nessie going back a lot further than people think. There is an account. Let me look it up so I can get the name. So there's a monk by the name an Irish monk named Saint Columbia, who was staying near the river Ness. The story goes, and this is the 6th century. The story isn't that old. It's from the 7th century. But he's on the river Ness, and this huge monster rises up out of the water to attack a swimmer. And St. Columbia basically exorcises it, and it goes away. It doesn't disappear. It sinks back under the water. But that doesn't super suggest this a regular non-magical being. The other one that's a very good example of this that everyone knows is Bigfoot. Mm. When most people think of Bigfoot, you think of, he's a Homo neanderthalis still hanging around. He's some sort of unknown species of great ape. But if you go back to Native American stories of Bigfoot, he's much more like the boogeyman. Mm. He's this almost supernatural creature that steals children away that are bad. They're supposed to have spiritual power. Directly related to Bigfoot is, of course, the Yeti, which is very much a creature of magic in Tibetan and Nepalese folklore.
Okay.
Here's another one, and one of, I think, the most interesting because of how much it straddles lines. Wendigo.
Oh, yeah.
So most of you probably know the story of the Wendigo. A man eats the flesh of another person. Usually in northern climates, the stories are mostly from the Algonquin tribes, which is northwestern American Canada. And then they change into this creature that's endlessly hungry, known as the Wendigo. There's more to it than that. Hmm. It's believed among native tribes, as I understand, and not being a native, I am by no means an expert. But the Wendigo is a type of spirit that hangs around in certain areas and essentially possesses a person who commits this grievous taboo of eating human flesh. So, in so many ways, it seems like a cryptid. It's a solid physical creature. But there is a spiritual component. Lisa for Truth asked a very good question, which is this the Skinwalker? No, Skinwalker is more of the Navajo.
Yeah, and it's more of a witch.
Yes. It's more like, the way I always think of Skinwalkers, it's like, if werewolves had nightmares, they'd have nightmares about Skinwalkers. Because, and I cannot tell you a lot about Skinwalkers. Brian cannot tell you a lot about Skinwalkers.
Actually, I did a lot of research.
But there's a huge block in the research that you did, and I'm sure you know more than I do, which isn't saying much. Native American folklore is not my specialty. I kind of wish it was, though. But among the Navajo, they don't talk about Skinwalkers. Particularly, they don't talk about Skinwalkers with other peoples.
Oh, yeah, no, that's true.
So you and I hear what's filtered out over the centuries. We don't know the entire story, and we're not going to get the entire story because this is just something they don't talk about with outsiders. And there are cultural reasons for that, and there's also a genuine fear that goes along with that. But Brian, why don't you fill us in, since you've done a lot of research and I honestly haven't?
Well, yeah, it was kind of incidental in a way. It started off with me doing my research for, my werewolf novel that I was originally going to write, my first novel that never got completed. I wanted to take some of the Native American shape-shifting legends and use them as the basis for a werewolf story rather than the typical Wolfman European tradition that we always had. I thought that would be something cool. So I read a bunch of books on that and related subjects. So the skinwalker, the shape shifting is kind of incidental. It's not its main thing. That's just one of the things that it can do because it has, witchcraft and magic and all of that. The main thing the skinwalker does is it curses people and steals essentially their life. It kills other members of the tribe, and it prolongs its own life unnaturally through that process. And it's does all the stuff that witches traditionally get blamed for doing.
This is news to me. Like I said, I haven't done nearly as much research.
Yeah, the skinwalker. I mean, they're called skinwalkers because they are known to put on like a wolf skin or a coyote skin and assume that form. And supposedly in the mythology, you can identify one of them versus a natural animal because the tail like hangs limp, like it's a like it's a skin, rather than actually moving around and being live.
Isn't there actual name in Navajo something like goes about on all fours?
Yeah, it's, there's a couple of different names like Gindaloshi or not
This is
Gindaloshi.
probably the most famous.
Yeah, that's the one. There is that that kind of is where the Skinwalker English translation comes from.
Makes sense. But just based on that and what little I'd heard, I'd always assumed the shape shifting was a much bigger deal, particularly because they can look like different people too, can't they?
Yeah, they can assume different forms. It's the turning into animals is more just a way for them to go around inconspicuously and kind of sneak into places without being quite as noteworthy.
Interesting, because as I understand it, part of the fear of why they don't tell people, particularly outsiders, is you never know if the person you're talking to is actually one of them.
Yeah, and then you become a target for them.
Yeah, and as I understand it as well, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but usually the way you become a skinwalker, isn't it killing like a member of your immediate family?
Yeah. You fashion like a bone bead or something, and you use like a blowgun to hit the person with it, and somehow that magically like transfers their life essence to yours. And that's the first one is always a member of your family.
Which I think my fiance makes an excellent point on the matter, which is if you assume that there are people that actually do this, and at some point in history, there's probably been at least one person who's tried it.
Yeah.
But the cornerstone idea of, okay, well, you're going to start by murdering your own family. Even if the magic isn't real, you're still a pretty horrible person.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think that's the idea, is that they're supposed to be like terrible people.
But again, shapeshifters are a whole other part of this whole line between cryptid and supernatural gets blurrier and blurrier and blurrier.
Yeah. I put them in a separate kind of class.
I can tell you a story about a skinwalker, though.
No.
I don't remember I don't think you ever got a chance to meet him, unfortunately. So I've talked many times on the show about my two mentors, Lou Gentili, who I know you never got to meet, and of course Father Joseph Brose. So the thing about Father Joe was he was part Serbian or Croatian, because I know his native language was Serbo-Croatian, but anyway, part from Europe. But his grandmother on his mother's side was a Blackfoot Indian, and not just a Blackfoot Indian, but she was the member of the tribe mainly tasked with keeping the herbalist lore. Something that has always fascinated me, but I never got to meet them. But Father Joe's aunts were actually nurses who kept records of those remedies and did a whole bunch of work to like figure out chemical compositions and stuff to try to understand why they worked. But when Father Joe was young, like a little kid, he was extremely sick. And from what he told me, every night, an owl would fly into the room and circle around the bed before flying back out. His grandmother, the Blackfoot Indian, drove it away, and he got better. And she claimed that it was a skinwalker.
Yeah, could be owl. Or in a lot of cultures, owls are just considered omens of like bad fortune.
Yeah, they're of death and ill fortune.
Yeah.
But it is at least a first-hand account of someone who had an encounter that someone who would have known identified it as such.
Yeah.
I don't know. I know enough about the stories about skinwalkers. I'm glad I don't live near any Navajo reservations. I'll put it like that. They seem extremely creepy. And human monsters carry a whole different threat.
Yeah.
In the fact they can carry guns and demons don't. Like I said, even if there's nothing magical about skinwalkers, somebody who still was willing to kill a member of their own family for power, that's just not right. And that matter, vampires, werewolves, shapeshifters of all types, some demons, fairies, and all the creatures of mythology occasionally get lumped in it as cryptids as well. Now, what I think is the most interesting about this is, well, cryptozoology is mostly seen as not science. The reality is there's a couple of animals that we've discovered over the years that technically qualified as cryptids at one time.
Yeah. Yeah,
That
the coelacanth.
Yep. Which is, for those who don't... Well, why don't you tell people, for those who don't know, what a coelacanth is?
Oh, it was a really big, ugly fish that was prehistoric, that was thought to have died out millions of years ago until they found one.
Around 35 million years ago, I think.
Oh, wow.
I mean, they've been gone a really long time.
More than I thought, yeah, but it turned out that there were still a small population.
You know, the even funnier part, at least to me, they actually found an indigenous tribe somewhere that regularly caught them when they went fishing. And didn't care for them because apparently they don't taste very good.
Yeah.
But they did catch them.
Nice.
And like everyone thought they had been extinct. But in fact, no, they're still alive.
Yeah. Giant squids.
Yep, another really good example. And they only really settled for the certainty of their existence quite recently.
Yeah.
Early 2000s. I mean, they were arguing that till the early 2000s when I want to say Jacques Cousteau finally caught live footage of them.
Might have been.
And but giant squids get big. There's colossal squids which get really big. You know, one of the most common that we've almost touched on already? If you go back to the 19th century to reports of explorers coming back from Africa, they describe something that, if you read the original accounts, sounds a lot like Bigfoot. It's tall, it's covered in fur, it can walk. It can walk on its hind legs comfortably. The eyes are animal, but have a gleam of intelligence, and the behavior is highly intelligent. For years, people thought this was made up nonsense, but now you can go to a zoo and see a mountain gorilla. And nothing about the description is wrong. They can walk on their back, on their hind legs. They're usually knuckle walkers.
Yeah.
Their eyes are very expressive, and they are extremely intelligent. And they're tall apes that are covered in fur.
Yeah.
Now that's not a cryptid. That's total fantasy. Lord Ruin. Lord Ruin comments that he knows the greatest and most mysterious of cryptids, an honest politician.
Oh.
And I think we can all agree there's no such thing. In whatever your party, whatever your country, there are no honest politicians. I'm sorry to break the news. In other news, Santa Claus isn't real either.
Yeah. for all the kids watching.
Is there kids that young watching this show at 8:30 at night on a Sunday? I'm not sorry. Go watch something kid friendly.
Yeah.
The show's never claimed to be. But there's another one of my other favorite examples, particularly because of the reaction. So explorers from Australia come back with a creature, hand it over to a naturalist. The naturalist is absolutely positively sure it's a hoax. He doesn't know how it was a hoax. He can't find the seams where it was sewn together. But this is obviously something like a Fiji mermaid. There's just no way there's an animal that has fur and a duck bill, but it's a leathery bill, and the males have poisonous spines at the end of their feet, and it's got a tail like a beaver. He just couldn't fathom, even with a dead specimen directly in front of him, that the platypus was a real creature.
Yeah.
The idea was ludicrous to him. But obviously, we now know, yes, there's no question, platypi are really real. Really quite real. Lisa, I approve of your sentiment, but I don't want to get too political. Just saying she's not going to watch a certain something on television tomorrow.
Oh.
Neither will I.
Yeah,
I don't want to go. Yeah. We're not going there. Or not, I'm sorry, that wasn't Lisa, that was Lord Rowan. I'm confusing myself. No, it wasn't Lisa. But it's like, yeah, I agree. I'm not watching the inauguration either. That is the end of that discussion because I don't want to turn this into a political channel. I think, no, it's not your fault at all, Lisa. And I've certainly neither Brian nor I has ever been shy about the fact that we are not pro-Trump.
Yeah.
In fact, unlike what Winston Churchill famously said, the older I get, the more liberal I find I'm turning.
Yeah. Or at least the more open-minded I seem to get, which is funny. It's the opposite of what is supposed to happen.
Well, it's also just the thing. It's less that the older you get, the more liberal you get. It's that older people tend to come from a time period which is more conservative. So it's not that you became more conservative, it's that your views are now viewed as more conservative than they were when you were young. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
There's plenty of things that even when you or I were a kid and we're only in our late 40s, would have been normal that are not considered socially, or at least would have been seen as normal, but are no longer socially socially acceptable. And again, now we're getting closer and closer to that line I don't want to cross.
Yeah. Go back to cryptids.
Yep. And let's face it, the honest politician joke's a good joke. I've used it before.
So what is a cryptid that you particularly enjoy?
I like Wendigo, and I like Nessie, and there's something there I'll circle back to in a minute. But I think my favorite. I have three favorites. One of which we can blame John French for. So the one that we can blame our friend John for is called the Snarlygaster.
Oh.
Which is a cryptid specific to Maryland. That's generally a giant flying humanoid with tentacles coming out of where its mouth should be and bat wings, which makes it a human-sized Cthulhu. Except there's not one of them. There's a bunch of them, and I'm here for it. Oh, Mokole Membe. Let me finish my thought, and we'll circle back to that, because that's another whole thing I want to talk about, partly because it's funny. But the other two are One from my home state of Pennsylvania, which is called a hoop snake. So, if anyone doesn't know, a hoop snake is a snake that is believed to bite its own tail and then roll down the hill chasing you. So this is supposed to be incredibly venomous, you'll die within seconds if it bites you or stings you because there's a stinger in the tail, of course.
Oh, I was going to say, what does it do when it catches you? It's already it's already biting itself. Can't do much.
Well, let's go and it flops back into regular snake form and
comes at you.
Yeah. And then my third favorite on my list of favorites, and this is not in a particular order, just because of the silliness of it, which is also kind of why I like hoop snakes, to be entirely honest, is the jackalope.
Oh.
Because it's just silly. It's a rabbit with antlers.
Yeah, the most famous fake cryptid.
Somebody was telling me recently that it was, it sort of isn't, it sort of isn't, because there was something people were making those fakes based on.
Mm.
So Lisa for Truth asked about Mokele Membe.
Mm.
And have you heard of that one?
Some kind of lizard, right?
If I'm wrong, and if you remember, or if Lisa knows, correct me on this. Mokele Membe is kind of a river monster reptile from Africa.
Okay.
The reason I'm thinking, if it is the one I'm thinking of, the reason I thought of it earlier and wanted to bring it up, and other ones like it up, and probably the reason Lisa thought of it, is there is a subsection, particularly among young Earth creationists, that are convinced it's a dinosaur. And that as such, it proves that dinosaurs did not go extinct millions of years ago. And evolution is wrong.
Mm.
The obvious problems with which is, one, dinosaurs didn't go extinct millions of years ago. Non-avian dinosaurs went extinct millions of years ago. Birds are still alive and well and are still directly related to dinosaurs.
Yeah. And you got tons of stuff in the ocean that, goes back. I mean, sharks haven't changed in millions of years.
Sharks haven't changed since, well, that's not quite true. Sharks haven't changed much.
Yeah.
In something like 65 million years. That said, they have changed. Coelacanth has changed. Crocodiles have changed. Now, in sharks and crocodiles cases, I think the biggest change is they got smaller.
Yeah.
But there are other evolutionary adaptations that are there. Because that's another argument they use, is that these animals haven't changed, so therefore evolution can't be true. It's but they have.
Yeah.
Again, some of them haven't changed very much because evolution's like that. If it finds a really good model that works really well, it doesn't feel the need to tinker.
Yeah.
And sharks are extremely good at what they do.
Yeah, they're very efficient.
But what's really funny about this line of reasoning with Mokele Membe is that the creationists I've heard and even talked to about it will tell you it's real. Other people, the Loch Ness Monster, other creatures that people describe as being like dinosaurs are real. Because that would mean that supports young Earth creationism. I've actually had one tell me that by the same logic, Bigfoot wasn't real because that would support evolution. It's like the evidence for all of them is equally bad. Picking the one that you think fits what you want to believe is bad. It's not just bad science; it's bad logic.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, at least Bigfoot. It's like you think of how big the Pacific Northwest is and some of the forests and stuff up there, and at least it seems slightly plausible that there could be a small group of, creatures that we don't see for whatever reason. But it's, most of the
It
other
is true of parts of Africa too.
Yeah, but it's hard to believe that, like some of these things that are in well-populated
Yeah.
states and areas, like, come on, somebody would have seen,
See, for that exact reason, I think the cryptids I tend to give the most credence to, not saying that they exist, but saying, okay, I can buy this, are sea monsters.
Yeah.
Because we know more about the dark side of the moon than we do about the ocean's floor.
Yeah.
If there's any giant, bizarre, mysterious creatures left on Earth, not just like, because we find new species every day. They're just like new variants of insects and things like that. But if something big, like bigger than a blue whale, purely hypothetically, exists, it's going to be in the oceans, because that's what we know. That's what we don't know anything about. And that's the Challenger Deep, the lowest point in the ocean, where only a handful of people have gone. I can believe there's something really weird down there that no human has seen yet, because we weren't in the right area at the right time. But I'm not. So here's the thing. To bring us back to the paranormal, there is a concept in mysticism. It's most common in Tibetan Buddhism, although you also find a very similar type of being in Western European magical traditions. Tibetans call it a tulpa. Western Europe, calls it an egregore, or a thought form. Have you heard of these?
Yes.
So there's a school of thought in the ghost hunter community, as it were, that some, maybe not all, but some cryptids may actually be these. For those who don't know, imagine the idea that you could believe in something so strongly and throw in some mystical rituals, usually, that you could make it real.
Yeah.
Not as in it's going to be a fully solid creature. It's going to be basically a spirit. But it looks like what you imagine. It acts like you imagine. And particularly, this is an interesting thought for Yeti. Because where is Yeti found? The Himalayan mountains. What is in Tibet kind of is part of that area. And the main people famous for doing this are Tibetan Buddhists.
Yeah.
But a lot of other creatures, a lot of Bigfoot sightings are traditionally on indigenous people's lands. I know of at least one Bigfoot expert that would try to communicate with them using Native American, indigenous American language, and felt that he could get response. So I think, and here's another example of this that I think most people either don't know about or at least forget about. Have you ever heard of phantom animals?
Vaguely, yeah.
Okay, I was going to ask you again to explain them, but if you only know them vaguely,
yeah, not by anything more than what the words suggest.
So all over in major cities in the United States, there have been reports of animals running wild that have no business there. Lions, tigers, grizzlies, big wild animals in the middle of like Chicago or New York. And I'm picking names at random. I don't know these are specific examples, but there are major cities that reports of numerous eyewitnesses, cops chasing some of them, and then they're just gone. Now, the obvious explanation that pretty much everyone thinks of is they escaped from a zoo or they escaped from a circus. Except in a lot of the cases, there's no record of an animal escaping a circus, a zoo, private homes, because some people keep weird pets. God, if I understand why. That obvious explanation doesn't seem to work. And again, it's been speculated that this is another example of creatures created by thought. What country teenager never clubbed a tree and moaned like a fake Bigfoot call before? Chris Palermo asks. I grew up in the country. I never did anything like that. But keep in mind, my main neighbors growing up were cows. And if you're wondering, no, I've never gone cow tipping. I'm a little skeptical how possible it is, because you know the problem with cow tipping?
Cows sleep sitting down.
No, yeah, cows sleep laying down. They don't sleep standing up. It's a little hard to push them over.
Plus, they also weigh like several hundred pounds.
Which is why it's usually a group of people that's supposed to push them over, not just one.
Yeah.
But I will say I've never personally had an encounter with any form of cryptid. I've never particularly gone looking, to be honest, either.
No, me neither.
I've been. I lived in the Pine Barrens when I was a little kid. I can't say I ever ran into the Jersey Devils. Now listening to whippoorwills at night was freaky as heck. And there's some interesting folklore about those, but those are well known and understood birds, not cryptids. And just like owls, people tell scary legends about whippoorwills. Specifically, whippoorwills are supposed to steal people's souls when they die.
Huh.
But I've also driven through the Pine Barrens a bunch of times because my dad lives part of the year in Ocean City, New Jersey, and particularly when I lived in Pennsylvania, the easiest way to get there involved driving the highway through the Pine Barrens.
Yeah. But
my mentor, Lou, actually did go looking for Bigfoot at one time with a supposed Bigfoot expert. Out in like the backwoods of Ohio. I remember him telling me the thing he loved about the trip was when I say the backwoods of Ohio, I mean the backwoods, way nowhere near any of the cities, being able to look up at night and just see the sky full of stars. That kind of experience, which is an amazing experience. Not faulting him at all, but the only remotely paranormal thing he had is the expert he was with making these calls in the native tongue and the local wildlife, but it was harder to define more than that, seeming to respond.
Huh.
I mean, was it Bigfoot? Wasn't it Bigfoot? I don't know. I'm a little skeptical, partly because I wasn't there. I only heard recordings afterwards.
Yeah, and Ohio's a little out of its range.
No, Bigfoot's seen all through Ohio and Western Pennsylvania. There's a story in the news a few years ago, complete with pictures of a weird creature seen in Western Pennsylvania. That they later determined was actually a black bear with a bad case of mange.
Yeah.
Which is a common explanation for a lot of these things.
Yeah,
particularly
chupacabras have been.
Every chupacabra they've ever found turned out to be a coyote with bad mange.
Yeah.
Now that doesn't mean there isn't a real chupacabra out there or a real Bigfoot out there, but again, I honestly don't know. Well, for one, I don't think it's really possible to have a definitive opinion on cryptids as a group because there's too bloody many of them. Every state has its own cryptids. Most countries have their own, cryptids as well. How do you decide this? Unless we actually start bringing back bodies, how do you decide this one is real? This one was made up. This one's a tulpa. It's very much a case where I think Bigfoot might exist, although we've had a lot of hoaxes. but I'd like to see something. At least if you want to argue that it's a physical creature, because people have shot at Bigfoot before.
Yeah.
In fact, President Teddy Roosevelt tried to hunt Bigfoot at least once. Although I've heard that may not be true, because there's a whole thing with a friend of his that was supposedly killed by a Bigfoot, but it might have just supposed to have been a bear.
Yeah. Probably more likely.
Yeah. Or, I mean, you never know for sure. There are presidents that have claimed to have seen UFOs, for example. Being president doesn't mean you can't have a weird experience. I'd have to do a lot more research than I've ever done on it, but from what little I know, we could probably do a whole episode about various ghosts seen in Washington, D.C., and for that matter, the White House in particular.
Oh, yeah.
Case in point, they supposedly see Lincoln a lot in the White House.
Well, I mean, it's old enough.
And we've talked about it before, but again, for the record, it doesn't have to be old to be haunted. Well, you find plenty of places that were built quite recently that are haunted either because they had something happen on the property before the house was built, or somebody did something stupid.
True.
And I'm not going to get into it because it's not really topic specific, but very cool, Teresa and Lisa. I mean, I've lived in the U.S. all my life. The only time I've been to Europe is, of course, Romania, which reminds me that I need to go poke the lovely people from the tour group again, because we're going to have them on again soon. Because if anybody is interested in the Romanian tour I keep talking about, they are doing it again this June. We are planning on having the tour guys, Nora and Gloria, back on the show. They're both lovely people and always fun to have to chat with. When I'm not certain, but just remembered I need to poke. They're on the list of people Kevin needs to poke about giving him an interview. So, any more thoughts on cryptids?
Not really. It's not kind of my area of knowledge. I know people that are much more into cryptids.
Yeah, we're going to talk to one of them about coming on, if memory serves. This was kind of, we need to talk. We're doing a show tonight because we've been doing well with guests or with viewers lately, and I want to keep the momentum going. We need a topic, and my first thought was we could do fairies. Like, yeah, Brian probably hasn't done that much research into fairy folklore. Well, now it's occurring to me
only as it crosses over with vampire.
Yeah, it's like it just as I said that, as the words came out of my mouth, it's like, yes, he's done at least some, because some of it crosses with vampire folklore.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. But it would be nice to get somebody that knows a lot about like fairy lore and stuff and talk with them.
So Teresa commented, apparently when I was in Romania, Alice Cooper and Johnny Depp were also in Romania, which is cool. I hadn't known that. She also comments that Vincent Price's daughter, Victoria Price, was there. Yes, Teresa. In fact, not only was she there, she was part of my tour group, so I met her. She did agree to give me an interview. I need to try. That's another person I need to try and pin down. I will say I did not meet Alice Cooper or Johnny Depp on the tour. I did meet Victoria. She is an extremely nice woman. It was a privilege to meet her. But very cool. And yeah, like I said, I was there with Victoria was on the same bus I was, so I know she was there. I didn't know about the other two. But yeah, I think does anybody that we have listener? We've got 4 people live listening in. Does anybody have any questions? And that is very cool. Teresa commenting she's met Alice Cooper. Like I said, I haven't met him. No disrespect intended. It's not really my type of music. I think he makes good music. It's a question of personal taste. But I've heard he's supposed to be a very nice guy.
Yeah, I loved his cameo in Wayne's World,
which I've never seen.
It's pretty funny. They go to one of his concerts, and of course, he's famous for being, Alice Cooper and all that. They go backstage and they're like, "Oh, we're gonna hang out with Alice Cooper," and they start, and like him and the other guy start having this intellectual conversation about the origin of the name Illinois, and how it's a Native American thing, and blah 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 blah. And Wayne and Garth are just looking at each other like, "What the hell did we walk into?" It was funny because it's just Alice Cooper not acting anything like the way his image would lead you to believe, which is actually close to the truth because, he's a really nice guy in normal life and a devout Christian. So,
which is a fascinating thing about. I mean, these are true. That's what kind of music. I'm not really good with music genres. I mean, heavier end of rock or metal, I want to say.
Yeah, he's definitely like hard rock, metal.
And Teresa comments that the vaudeville stage show is that's amazing. And I've heard good things. I know the magician James Randi has worked with him in the past. And again, it's personal taste, not an opinion on the man or on his performances. I don't. To be completely honest, and this is near blasphemy to a lot of people, I don't really listen to that much music.
Yeah, I never hear you mention music.
Also, to be completely honest, I'm slightly tone deaf. So it's like, it just doesn't hit me the way it hits most people. I like some country. That's about it. And even that, if I'm in the car, I like to listen to something while I drive. I tend to find driving very stressful. But I do audiobooks. I don't do music. Or I'll have YouTube in the background. And I like some rock, but I like older, slower, smoother. Although I've heard it said more than once that a lot of very famous like evil metal type musicians, not saying they're actually evil, but just the people that really offend the Christian nuts, are supposed to actually be really nice people.
Yeah.
Like Alice Cooper, I'm sure evangelicals can't stand him. Has a reputation of being a really nice guy. I've heard what's his name? Marilyn Manson's also supposed to be pretty nice.
Yeah, he's pretty intelligent. I've seen him in interviews.
I haven't seen much of him either. Like I said, I mostly know it's no disrespect to men. It's just not my taste.
Yeah. So, are there any questions, or
there hasn't been any questions?
Okay.
Because we're getting ready to wrap up. We will have another show next week. I'm also mostly postponing, but there's at least a video or two I'm planning on making that Brian won't be involved with because he's not a fan of it. But I want to do a video on the Amazon series Has Been Hotel. And I'll tell my regular listeners who are listening now the joke I'm going to start with, just because you guys are going to know it's a joke. But I want to troll some people a little first. So it's going to be demonologist reacts to Has Been Hotel. And so maybe the first minute it's going to be, you're going to hell. This is sinful. Don't watch this. And then I'll break character and admit, actually, I really like the show. But it's funnier if I play the part for at least a minute. At least I think. At least I will personally find it funnier, and that's good enough for me.
might give you better results on the YouTube algorithm.
Probably, and I think it'll be a lot of fun if I get like a lot of responses from people who see like the first minute and then turn it off. Like, watch starting ad and then put the time I get serious. Give me another minute. Let's see if you still think I'm a jerk. Although funny enough, cute story. When I first saw the pilot that was on YouTube for a Has-Been Hotel, I thought it was really good. I was looking forward to the rest of the series. When I saw the first episode on Amazon, I really didn't like it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's me, so I not that then or now or ever was I like, people should watch this is evil. I wouldn't say that. At least without it being much worse than it actually was. It was just, again, it's like, this isn't for me. And then from a bunch of prodding from Amisha, and I watched another episode, and another, and it's like, okay, I was wrong. I like this. But there's at least some interesting, while it is not theologically sound at all, to any mainstream form of Christianity, it's not, and in its defense, it's not trying to be. It does raise some interesting philosophical points that I feel like talking about. So I'm going to do a different series on a different day, and maybe just one video or two videos. But anyway, I'm going to do a video or two more talking about what I think of the series. Cool. Because I like it. And I think it's worth watching. Although I will say, for anyone who's listening to me now and has not seen the series, for the love of God, don't show it to your children. Which is not an insult. It wasn't made to be a children's series.
No.
Its sister show, which is still on YouTube, Hell of a Boss, which is also fantastic, outright has a warning at the beginning of every episode. Don't show, this is not for children. So I don't feel it's wrong to say this is not, something not for children is not for children. But interesting. Lisa comments she saw an episode of TV where God ran a hotel. The only thing I could think of is Fantasy Island, but that's not quite right.
Huh. No, it's some old sitcom or something.
Yeah. I mean, I know the guy in Fantasy Island is definitely supposed to, from what I understand, supposed to be some sort of supernatural being, but I don't think he's supposed to be God. Although it might be an old sitcom, I also think there was a evangelical Christian remake of Fantasy Island made just for PureFlix, which was basically an outright angels running a hotel. That's a whole other rant I could get into, but it's definitely worth another video. As a devout Christian, and at least an amateur writer myself, I am more than a little personally offended by the fact Christianity's forgotten how to make good art. We used to be good at this.
Yeah. Now you got Kirk Cameron saving Christmas.
Oh God! And just how awful a movie that is.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, even setting aside the absurdity of Christmas doesn't need to be saved. I mean, it's basically pro-greed but think of every bad aspect of Christianity that Christians don't like, and it's glorifying it.
Mm.
Some of which, it's like the trees and things like that. It's like, let people have their trees, for God's sakes. It's being childish. But glorifying the commercialism. And at least I agree, Christianity isn't what it's supposed to be. But it's like, when you look at modern Christian movies, where it's a sermon with a thin story to go around it, and then think about, the Ten Commandments with Charlton Heston, or some of the medieval passion plays and things like that. We used, Chronicles of Narnia, for God's sakes. We used to make good art, and now it's more about it's all about the message, and they forgot about the rest of it. and that annoys me to no end. It's like we could do better, and we should end now because we're about to run out of time.
Yes.
So that's it, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. This is Kevin Mears, the Paranormal Encyclopedia, saying good night and God bless.
And Brian McKinley saying, keep your fangs sharp.
Good night, everybody. And stop live.